Welcome in the latest episode of that SEC podcast. I'm your host, Michael Bratton. Go by SEC Mike on Twitter. And hey, no cousin Shane. He's taking time off here with the family. I think he's playing video games right now as we speak. So, but hey, don't turn off just yet because we got a great interview with our buddy Jake Wimberly. He's been on the show a number of times. Going to go all across the SEC with Jake. And, pretty slow time here in the SEC news-wise. So just two things I wanted to hit on real quick. LSU, not official yet, but being reported, I think Matt Zenich, 24/7 Sports, first reported it. But it looks like LSU is going to promote from within for their open offensive coordinator position. Joe Sloan, the quarterback's coach, receivers coach, Cortez Hankton. They were the offensive coordinators. I don't know how they really broke it down. I think pass game coordinator and just play caller here for the bowl game. Same duo, Joe Sloan and Hankton. That's who they're going to go moving forward with. Now, it's interesting. Big changes for LSU's defense this offseason. Their previous offensive coordinator, Mike Denbrock, obviously he went back to Notre Dame, I believe, to be offensive coordinator. But this is going to be fascinating to see. With Jane Daniels and Malik Neighbors and Diggs transferred out, Brian Thomas off to the NFL, veteran offensive line, a quarterback. It'll be a new starter, Garrett Nussmeier, but he's got plenty of experience. But Brian Kelly's really got to nail this. This has got to work out because I don't think we can take a big step back. So maybe with all the changes on the defensive side of the ball, we didn't want changes on both sides of the ball. But this is a gamble in a sense. I think Joe Sloan's an outstanding quarterback coach, clearly. Jaden Daniels winning the Heisman Trophy. And Hankton, I mean, their receivers speak for themselves. He was at Georgia previously, I believe, when they were under Kirby Smart. So, I mean, I'm not doubting these guys. I'm just questioning them running an offense because we've not seen it outside of a bowl game. So, this is going to be pretty interesting to see. Big move here by Brian Kelly. And one other one before we get to our interview with Jake Wimberly. Not a lot of recruiting talk on here, but Tennessee just landed a 5-star quarterback this week, George McIntyre from Nashville. So this could be, 2 out of the last 3 recruiting cycles. Tennessee signs a 5-star quarterback, and it's always, this is a 2025 prospect, number 3 quarterback prospect in the country. I believe a top 20 overall prospect. And if you can land that quarterback early in a recruiting cycle, you can really start to build momentum, have your quarterback be your lead recruiter in a class that Tennessee, they need to do a little bit better if they want to be considered an annual national championship contender on the recruiting trail as well as on the field, obviously. But I think this is big news. And the one thing, Tennessee, they may not have the roster of a Georgia or Texas or Alabama. Of course, Alabama's in a little bit of a decay right now. But how you make up that ground, having an elite quarterback. We've seen that time and time again. If you have an elite quarterback, he can take you to new heights that you're not used to seeing in college football. So with Nico, if he's as good as advertised, he's going to be in the NFL before long. Maybe this George McIntyre could be the starter for Tennessee. And they just signed another. He wasn't a 5-star. Jake Merlinger, he's a 4-star, but very touted 4-star quarterback. So Tennessee loading up on this quarterback room. That's what you expect when you got Josh Heupel as your head coach. Stock up on these quarterbacks and engineer this offense. Get it back to where it was that great season under Hendon Hooker. But like I said, not a lot of news around the SEC. So let's kick it over to this interview with Jake Wimberly, ESPN Radio out of Mississippi. All right, we're pleased to be joined by one of our absolute favorites, friend of the show, Jake Wimberly. You know him, host of the Afternoon Drive, ESPN Radio 105.9 out of Jackson, Mississippi, and of course, owner of the CFBHourglass.com. Jake, how's it going, brother?
Michael, it's going good. Happy belated New Year. And look, hey man, everything's good. How about you guys?
Oh man, we're doing good, but we are already, like you said, New Year, already looking ahead to 2024. What looks like could be, I mean, it's going to be a year of change and uncertainty, and now with Nick Saban out, I mean, I know Georgia's still a monster, but it's just the SEC is going to be different. And I don't know how I feel about it just yet. Have you adjusted to life post Nick Saban?
I don't think so. I don't know that any of us really have yet, right? And I think obviously it'll hit us when the football games come back and we get back into August. And I mean, I think we see it now. It was such a shock when he decided to step down. But you're right. I mean, from quarterback changes around the league, coaching changes around the league. You talk about the transfer portal transforming rosters. It's going to be a whole. And look, hey, don't forget about this: Texas, Oklahoma in the league, new television contracts. It's going to be a whole new deal next year.
Right, and chief among transfer portal, and I know everything you're doing down there on the afternoon drive. People have got to be fired up, Jake, about this Ole Miss team and the potential coming off a big season, 11-win season, winning a New Year's Six bowl, all the additions in the transfer portal, all the pieces coming back. Is it college football playoffs or bust for the Ole Miss Rebels? And that would have been crazy to say a couple of years ago, but with the 12-team format, I think it's more than fair to expect that from the Rebels.
Yeah, I think college football playoff or bust is the expectation. I think that's where this program is. And, Michael, you've been around this a long time, and I know our listeners have. And I would say that at least the start of the offseason, this is probably the most anticipated Ole Miss offseason since Eli Manning's senior year. And it may even be more than that. I mean, that's how long it's been. Now, obviously, Hugh Freeze brought a lot of excitement, but you're talking about Lane Kiffin, now 2 New Year's Six-day games, coming off a win, over Penn State in the Peach Bowl, 11 wins. Yes, they lost Quinshon Judkins, but I think the staff feels like, hey, yeah, that's a position, believe it or not, they can replace by committee or something to that effect. You bring back Jackson Dart. The expectations, I think, in Oxford are absolutely college football playoff or bust.
Do you think Lane Kiffin has anything to prove, with this loaded roster? I mean, it's fair getting your tail kicked by Georgia, losing to the greatest of all time annually, Nick Saban. I think those excuses are out the window. And I'm not saying they have to beat Georgia. They do play Georgia next year in Oxford. But, I mean, if they go 9-3, Jake, I think there's going to be serious questions on Lane Kiffin and if he is an elite coach. Do you think that's fair?
I think yes, you can definitely make the argument for that. I mean, and look, with winning breeds success, and then with success breeds expectation, and then sometimes that comes back to bite you in the butt, right? So, but yeah, I think 9-3 and not making the playoffs. While most teams, if you say 80% of the country would take 9-3 in a nice bowl game, I think with the expanded playoff and every bit of effort that Ole Miss has put in their collective and recruiting, that yeah, there will be some I guess you could say some hurt feelings, shall we say, for lack of better words, in Oxford. But look, there's no sure things in this, and we know this, right? I mean, how many teams will the SEC garner for the playoff? Will they get 3? Will they get 4? Will Notre Dame get a spot? Will the Big 12 get 2? Will the committee try to show some parity here and say, well, let's maybe coax the numbers a little bit and give 3 to this conference, 3 to this one, 3 to this one? There's a lot of unknowns, and there's going to be some teams in the SEC that's left out that feel like they probably should have got in.
If Ole Miss does this, Jake, let's say they win 12, 13 games. I don't know the number, but let's say they make the playoff. Let's say even they advance in the playoff, and I don't think it really matters how far they go. I think that would satisfy, whoever's given to the NIL and the fan base and all that. Is this sustainable? Can they do this year after year, or is this just a unique situation of players coming back? They're throwing all the chips in, getting the NIL going. Is this 1 year to win it all, or do you think that Ole Miss could be an annual playoff contender?
I think a lot of that, and that's a great question, and I think that's a great unknown, not just for Ole Miss. I think that's a great question for college football. I mean, yes, look, the Alabamas, the Georgias, the Ohio States, the Texases of the world, they're going to have money. Typically, they're going to have money to burn. We see what Ohio State has done in the transfer portal, over $13 million unofficially that they've spent. How long will people continue to give to collectives? I mean, you're asking again, fans to give, to the school, or fans to give to buy tickets, and now to a collective. How long does that whole process? Obviously winning helps. Winning breeds success. It breeds people wanting to give money. But that's a great question, and I don't want to call it a 1-year wonder, But I do think we need to watch this whole transfer portal window and say, how long can teams and programs sustain this particular model with the transfer portal era we're in?
Right. Yeah. I mean, if they have wild success, you got to think there's going to be teams across the country that kind of follow this lead. So that's going to be fascinating to see. I don't think we've spoken to you, Jake, since Mississippi State hired Jeff Lebby. Thoughts on, it's only been a month or so, but, the staff he's put together, the portal additions. What's your overall thoughts? I know it's early, but just on Jeff Lebby and the job he's done at Starkville.
Well, look, I think Zach Selman did a really good job of this. And I know a lot of people said some, and, depending on who you talk to, well, going to Oklahoma, that's where he's from. That's kind of a lazy hire. I don't feel that way. For me, I said, hey, look, if I was Zach Selman, I'd be looking for three things in a football coach. One, a guy that understands the collective and the NIL era. Jeff Lebby gets off the plane wearing a collective Mississippi State collective shirt. Check that box. A guy that understands the need for recruiting. He checks that box. And a guy that runs a high tempo offense that's going to play outside the hashes and push the ball down the field. Because at Mississippi State, you cannot do what they just went through, which is try to run 3 yards in a cloud of dust. Ball control, you got to play it a little differently. He checks that box. When you look at what they were able to do, their staff, and got to give credit for keeping Chad Bumpus around, former Mississippi State wide receiver, who was on that staff with Zach Arnett. They really did a great job, kind of keeping some guys in the state, really kind of stacking and stocking that wide receiver room with some young talent. Quarterbacks, one from Baylor, another kid from the Northeast. They've done a nice job in the transfer pool. It's one of those deals where it kind of goes under the radar to what Ohio State and Colorado and Louisville, Ole Miss, and others are doing in the transfer portal. But I think under the circumstances, Jeff Lebby and his staff have done a great job.
Yeah, and I got to be honest with you, Jake, I was kind of stunned when I saw the reception he got. You mentioned he's got the NIL collective gear on, but I mean we're talking a mass of people. They had like a rocks concert out there. I mean, I remember it being a big fanfare for Mike Leach, but I think that's a given his reputation. Everybody, before he even came to Mississippi State, we all knew who Mike Leach was. I don't think vast majority of fans across the country had any idea who Jeff Lebby is, and they still may not. But at Mississippi State, they treated this guy like a rock star. How fired up is his fan base to embrace this new era after just such an awful season last fall?
Oh, I think the fan base is all in on Jeff Lebby. And, Michael, this again will fly under the radar. And you could make this argument at, 15 of the 16 Southeastern Conference schools, or 14 of the 16, now counting Texas and Oklahoma. But Mississippi State has got a proud fan base. And that, Starkville and Davis Wade Stadium on a Saturday afternoon or Saturday night now is nothing like it was 10 years ago or 20 years ago. Credit Dan Mullen for a lot of that. Credit, Scott Strickland when he was athletics director for building out a great master plan, for using the SEC money wisely. And that's a proud fan base, and they want a winner. I don't think that they don't not want a winner, but that's a fan base that will get behind you. That's a fan base that will fall in love with you. I mean, you look at their baseball program, you look at their basketball program right now, and this is a fan base that wants a winner, and I think the fan base is all in on Jeff Lebby.
Let's switch gears. You keep talking about Texas and Oklahoma for obvious reasons. We're all excited to get them. Do you think they're legitimate? And when I say that, Jake, I'm already seeing preseason top 5, playoff contenders. But you talk to any SEC fan, they say, yeah, that's great. Welcome to the SEC. There ain't no Kansas and Kansas State and Iowa State and all these loser teams in this conference. I mean, Kentucky get you, South Carolina will get you on the right day, on and on and on. This is not going to be some easy path to the college football playoff. What's your level of confidence that Texas can walk into this league and be one of the best teams immediately?
Well, you referenced the college football hourglass, and I'm chalking through now building spreadsheets, and, it'll take me a few months to get all this together with coaches and talent and all this kind of stuff, quarterbacks. But looking at Texas last year and what Steve Sarkisian, and look, Texas has always had money. Texas has always had, at least on paper, talent. But this team just looked different this past year. I mean, you look at the game they played over at Alabama. Defensively, up front, their front seven looks like an SEC team. They've got depth. Quarterback, they bring one of the better quarterbacks into the Southeastern Conference. skill position players. They've done a great job. Sarkisian knows how to call, on game day. He is a great play caller. So I think Texas is ready to come in and compete with the Georgias and the Alabamas, the Ole Misses of the world. Oklahoma, I still scratch my head at because, they lost so much in the transfer pool. They lost offensive coordinator at Mississippi State, defensive coordinator. They changed him out. A lot of attrition on that offensive front, skill position players. So I don't know that Brent Venables is the guy. They had a great bounce back this year. I would say if I'm handicapping this way too early, Texas is ready, but I don't know that Oklahoma's ready, if that makes sense.
Yeah. What about Kalen DeBoer down there in Alabama? Thoughts on that hire? Was this as good as Alabama could have done, do you think?
It's interesting. I was talking about this because when the news broke Nick Saban was retiring, we were actually on air when that happened. So, we took a break, and it's weird. You kind of had to recompose, like, wow, we got to talk about this. Like, we really got to talk about Nick Saban retiring. And I think I remember looking on X, you guys went live. Everybody was talking about it. It was just a weird, unreal moment, kind of a surreal moment. But I said, hey, look, who's going to be the guy and what kind of guy wants to follow the guy? Like, I didn't think it was going to be Dabo Swinney. I felt like that had kind of passed, several years ago. Lane Kiffin came to mind. I said, it had to be somebody that didn't mind taking a risk. Well, and they needed to be a coach that could, deal with some of that pressure. Kalen DeBoer, at least at face value, he's playing with house money, right? I mean, he won big at the NAIA level massively. He goes to Washington after being an offensive coordinator at Indiana, and he won massively at Washington. So why not make that final leap to arguably, and you could say, the best football program ever in the history of college football, the Alabama Crimson Tide, and just roll the dice and let's see what happens. The question for me, so yes, I think they made a great hire. You look at his staff, it looks like a staff that's coming together very nicely for him. How patient, Michael, will Alabama fans be? How patient? I got to give credit to Josh Pate, late kick Josh, 247. He said this, hey, Alabama fans 35 and under are kind of trust fund football fans, right? They've had it really, really good. That's why I like the way he framed that up. How do those fans adjust to maybe a 9-3 season? It's not a bad season. How do they do? How do they treat their coach? It's never easy being the guy behind the guy. So I tip my cap for Kalen DeBoer for taking this on, because a lot of times it doesn't work out. In this case, it could work out.
Now, that being said, Jake, I really wanted to get your thoughts on this. Who's more likely to win the SEC next season, Texas or Alabama?
And we're just keeping it at Texas and Alabama. I'm going to lean Texas just because of the continuity. You look at Alabama, and we won't know this for another year or two. 25 plus guys out of the transfer leave the program this year. I saw a stat, I believe Chris Marler, somebody put it out there. This would have been like the 6th rated class in the SEC this year. You only had 7 or 8 guys that came in. Now, obviously, that second window will hit. They'll get some guys in. Last year, Bama had some attrition in the transfer portal. That's going to take effect at some point. Now, to what degree, we don't know. But if you're giving me Texas and Alabama, I'm going to lean Texas to win the SEC between those two.
Are you buying Mizzou? I don't know if you've looked ahead at their schedule. I mean, they're going to be favored in 9-10 games next year. Do you think they can make another run at it? And I'm not doubting them, or anything like that. But I don't want to say smoke and mirrors either, because that's not fair. But I think it's realistic for those fans to almost like Ole Miss, where 5 years ago you would have been laughed at had you said Missouri to the college football playoff. But I think it's real. I think those fans having those expectations are legitimate. What's your thoughts on that?
No, I think it is. I mean, I think the comparisons and the parallels that Ole Miss program and Missouri are on are very similar. Ole Miss is recruited a little better, but you look at, the quarterback situation, the skill set burns in Missouri. Something good's going on there, and they've got that thing rolling. And Gary Pinkel showed this way back when the Big 12. If you do it right, you can win at Missouri. And, Eli Drinkwitz took the stage at SEC Media Days last year, and it was kind of chalked at, I can't put you in this. I can't remember what you had, Missouri. I had them winning 4 or 5 ball games. Everybody's like, that's a garbage program. He kind of laughed at it. Like, okay, yeah. He got the last laugh. I tell you what, this is a really good football team. The thing for Missouri, much like Ole Miss, that we got to see now is you're not hiding from anybody. You're not sneaking up on anybody. So you're going to get everybody's they got as good a shot as anybody. When you get past Texas and Georgia and even Alabama, you go Ole Miss, Tennessee, Missouri, maybe Oklahoma, LSU. They got as good a shot to grab one of those spots as anybody.
Yeah, I agree with you. But let me ask it to you this way, Jake, because hey, all these teams got playoff hopes now. I think that's what we're getting into with a 12-team model. I mean, half the league's going to think, well, playoff or bust. You can only pick one: Ole Miss, Missouri, or Tennessee. Which one of those most likely to make the college football playoff this season?
Today, give me Ole Miss. But let me put a but. Can I put a caveat on this? And help me with this because I can never get it right. Nico Liemalava or Leva? Give me the right pronunciation here.
Iamalava. I can't do it either.
Thank you. So if Iamalava gets this right, if he's the guy, like if he meets those expectations, he could be the best quarterback in the league. So then that moves Tennessee to a different level. And, Josh Heupel, we already know he can coach out of his mind. He's got a good staff. They've got a good football team. A little bit of a dip this past year. But today, give me Ole Miss. But if Iamalava is everything that this guy is advertised to be, it could be Tennessee.
Are there any teams that we've not mentioned, Jake, that you think could surprise in the SEC? And that it doesn't have to be winning the conference or even making the playoff. But is there a team that few are talking about that you think could really exceed expectations next year?
I think you got to look at Brian Kelly at LSU and what is the expectations of LSU? Changing over a defensive staff, new quarterback. Brian Kelly, we know, is a very, very good football coach. So, LSU fans are going to expect, 9-10 wins. Heck, LSU's like, why not us in this playoff discussion? But I think across the board, everybody thinks Jaden Daniels, Heisman Trophy guy, off to the NFL. They're going to take a step back. They likely will, but will they exceed expectations? What about Hugh Freeze down at Ole Miss? Or excuse me, at Ole Miss, boy, that was a Freudian slip. Hugh Freeze at Auburn, what does he do in year two? I mean, you're talking about a year one where they had Georgia on the ropes. They had Alabama on the ropes. Can they make that next step? What about Texas A&M and Elko? We've kind of not said a whole lot about that whole situation. Ross Bjork goes to Ohio State, new football coach in search for an AD. There's not a lot of pressure on Elko in year one. So could that help them in a year where maybe they are, in November vying for one of those playoff spots? So I think, when you take off Vanderbilt, you take off Mississippi State, at least right now, you take off Arkansas and Florida because of their schedule, South Carolina as well. Kentucky, can Kentucky finally make that next step? LSU, Auburn, and some of those other Oklahoma, throw them in there as that next group. Somebody may springboard out of that group.
Last thing I got for you, Jake, I'm trying to bring some positivity to one of these fan bases that's down. You just referenced all three of them, so it's funny that you said that. South Carolina, Florida, or Arkansas. Which one has a better season next year? South Carolina, Florida, or Arkansas?
Wow. And we've combed through the schedules. I don't have it in front of me. I know this. Florida, as we know, I don't know what Florida, who did that or why. That schedule's awful. I just don't see a path to Florida getting bowl eligible. And look, I hate it for Billy Napier. This could be it for him. Arkansas, it just seems like Sam Pittman is losing ground there, very, very fast. Give me South Carolina, Shane Beamer, obviously picking up a couple quarterbacks in the transfer portal. I would have to lean South Carolina, but I could see all three coaches having issues come October/November.
Wow, Jake, that was the most depressing, optimistic outlook for three teams I've ever heard. No, I kid. But hey, Jake, before you go, tell my audience, where can they find you? Where can they follow your work?
Yeah, I appreciate that. You can find me on X at Jake Wim. Also, you can find the podcast on all the traditional platforms, iTunes, Spotify. I think we're still on Podbean. You have to check that. But also YouTube, and more. Just search Jake Wimberly Show. You can stream us 3 to 6 on the zone1059.com. We're on Monday through Friday. We'll be on tomorrow, chalking it up as we look towards the NFL this weekend.
All right, Jake, just want to say thanks again for joining the show. It's kind of last-minute deal here, but didn't have an episode yesterday, so really wanted to make sure we got something out today. Still trying to line up all kinds of guests for this week and next week. Still got a great show coming up Wednesday night. Stephen Lassen and I, we're going to do our first live show, so be on the lookout for that on the YouTube's got a fun topic there. Got other guests lined up throughout the week. And the return of an in-studio guest coming Saturday night on YouTube, and then probably Monday for the audio version. But we got stuff cooking behind the scenes, trying to keep this show absolutely loaded and just trying to deliver the best SEC content we possibly can, even though football season may be done, but the podcast ain't going anywhere. So I do appreciate each and every one of you for checking us out. We'll catch you on